My name is Snoeyenbos. I'm the manager of international sales for Project Muse. Project Muse is an aggregation of humanities and social science publishers, all nonprofits. We are based at the Johns Hopkins University Press in Baltimore, Maryland. At this time, we work with about 250 nonprofit publishers, university presses, scholarly societies, and independent journals. So why would we make the effort to work with a developing country? We're a pretty small staff, and we've got our hands full as it is. But I'm a librarian by training. I self-identify as a librarian, and equity of access to information is at the core of librarianship's principles. Just because you're born in a poor country doesn't mean that you should have access to less information than people in the rich countries. The Muse publishers are all mission-driven publishers. We want to do good. They told us in a recent survey that actually dissemination is more important to them than revenue, but they're lying about the revenue. We've heard from many university presses that the university appreciates their brand dissemination. It's a way to get University of Pennsylvania Press, a way to get Johns Hopkins' name out into the world, and ultimately attract scholars to the institution. We also see that there's great potential for authors from these countries that you might not be hearing from otherwise. Our publishers have said that since we've been participating in INASP, they have been receiving more submissions, and they're getting a broader variety of submissions because suddenly half of the world has been turned on and is available to them. Money matters. But we're not trying to get rich here. However, there is potential that some of these countries will continue to develop economically, and one day they might be paying a very different price than they are today based on what's affordable and appropriate. So why not do it yourself? Muse is an aggregation, and we often hear from our publishers that they want to just do these things themselves. Well, it can take an enormous amount of time to reach out to developing countries. It can also end up being expensive. If you're shipping books to faraway land, that's expensive. If you're going to spend the time to do one-on-one with a scholar, that takes a lot of time. We also needed somebody to give us advice about how to do it, and INASP has the expertise. They know what conditions are like in these countries. They can tell us the best and most efficient way to work. They can provide context. Development is not a one-way street. We've seen, and I'll come back to this, but some countries move forward and then they fall back a bit. And I think if you don't really understand the situation, you might be like, well, they're rich now, they can pay full price. Well, that's not always the way it works, and certainly the libraries don't always benefit directly from the riches of the central government. The other reason to not do it yourself is to make it a sustainable effort, an institutional commitment over time, not just one person's hobby horse. But when you get engaged with another organization, they can help carry you through the times when maybe one individual loses interest. Why not just send materials directly to scholars? We hear this a lot. Well, if you send one book to one scholar, you're helping one person. If you send one book to one library, you're helping the entire institution because everybody will have access. Also, it's way more efficient. Look, nonprofit publishers are often, I think somebody earlier said they're on a knife edge of finance and resources. So do it the most efficient way you can. Reach the most researchers with the least effort. Now, how did we end up with INASP? Well, first of all, we're not eligible for Hanari, Agora, OARI, or ARDI. So then people said, oh, you're humanities. I think INASP is the one that would work for you. So we started talking to them. A huge concern for Project Muse, because we are an aggregator, is that we must protect the intellectual property of our publishers. I was reassured at every stage that INASP would do this with us and for us. And enforcement of abuse monitoring has been one of the things that we have looked at most closely, and they have succeeded on every front. The other thing is that they didn't force us to do free. Project Muse is a revenue share. If we were to give the content away for free, that would be a challenge in our royalty structure. So they encouraged us to consider appropriate pricing, not free, not full price, but something appropriate. And I appreciated that. They also have taught us a lot along the way about what it's like to be a researcher with low bandwidth. Actually, we have low bandwidth in a lot of places in the USA and Canada, so you can't pretend like this is only an issue for developing countries. And they have taught me about the budget cycles that exist in some of these countries, the way government funding works or local funding. And I know that INASP is teaching the recipients a lot. They work hard with librarians, with scholars, with the budget makers, with the governments to help explain to them how research resources work, how to create budgets that will ensure they can have the resources into the future, et cetera. Also, they have promised me that they will always be the bad cop. I can be the kindly publisher giving out resources, and they can be the ones who enforce the payment process or enforce our abuse monitoring issues. I can always be good, and they can always be bad. Actually, they're mostly good. They're mostly good, but they get tough when they have to. And they've trained the libraries that that's the way they're going to be. So how's it going at this point for us? The initial conversations were in 2004. It took until 2007 for us to get the paperwork done, and we started with 2 subscribers, Ethiopia and Madagascar. Now in 2016, we have journals customers in 11 countries. We're reaching over 750 institutions. We have sold book collections in 9 countries, and those are reaching over 200 institutions. So that's 14 countries total right now, and you can see the list there. I think it's unlikely that any of you are making substantial revenue from any of these countries. Probably not today, and probably not in the near future. So you might want to think about engaging in a program like INASP. What are they using? That's the question I get the most from our publishers. Well, I think these are just 3 years, and you can see how similar it is, right? Northeast African Studies is in there, African Studies Review, East African Social Science Review, but you also see Advertising and Society Review. You see Library Trends, you know that's the librarians are up in there. And you see Journal of Democracy. Journal of Democracy is the #1 most used journal in Muse, always and forever. But so like more generally, what is it that they're using? Well, they're looking at democracy, capacity building, human rights, environmental policies, women's rights. This is the same stuff that is being used by all our customers overall. And when I say all our customers, just think our usage is so heavily influenced by the US, UK, well, US and Canada, UK, and Western Europe. So these people are not doing anything unusual. They're looking at topical and theoretical content, same way the rest of our customers do. And they're looking at content specific to their own country or community. They're looking at authors, actors, musicians, politicians, and philosophers. This is what every single country consortium that I've looked at their usage, this is what they do. The Brazilians look at Brazil. The UK looks at UK. The French look at France. This is normal behavior. What have we learned? I think our single greatest fear was abuse of intellectual property. This is absolutely not an issue. We have more abuse monitoring issues from Western Europe than we have ever had collectively from this region. The usage trajectories. I thought usage would just start slow and then go up, up, up. But this hasn't been the case. This is a little puzzling. We're trying to figure out why it happens, but usage kind of surges and ebbs and surges and ebbs. Could be about electricity, could be about whether the universities are open and functioning at full force, could be about internet access. Not quite sure what's going on. We also thought the development trajectories of these countries would be very linear. You know, you got a poor country and it just gets better, better, better all the time. But this is not the case. Côte d'Ivoire was a big customer in the beginning. They've kind of had some political issues. Cuba was in, now they're out. Hopefully they come back. Nepal was really going great guns until the earthquake, and now their usage has fallen off. Pakistan was in when they were westward facing, moving toward democracy, and now they're out. You know, they have different focus right now. So it's a new scene every year. One thing that we are working with this year is graduating some people out of the program. This was always the goal. They shouldn't be dependent forever. But to be honest, I think for me and for Ann Powell, this is harder than we thought it would be. Partly you're kind of letting go of your little children, I suppose. But also some of the concerns that we had when we first started the program are now back because we're moving them out of the program back into direct relationship with us without the very extremely close supervision of INASP. INASP is still there. They're not leaving us hanging, but you know, still trying to figure out how to create a new relationship with these country consortia. So El Salvador, Ghana, Uganda, and Zimbabwe are getting kicked out in the friendliest way ever. And the Muse publishers love that we are doing this. As mission-driven organizations, they want to do good. They have a conscience, but they also know that they don't really have the time or energy to do it. It's hard to keep track of all these countries and follow the political ups and downs, the economic ups and downs. Working through INASP, we don't have to. If I have a question, I can ask Ann Powell. She and her staff will know, but I don't have to track all these countries myself. So is it worth it? It does take staff time. It really does, but it is absolutely worth it. I would be very frustrated if the bosses said we wouldn't do this anymore. I think it's so important. So, thank you very much.